They tried to erase the final moments of the most feared men who ever walked the earth. Behind sealed bunker doors, inside filthy drainage pipes, and on blood-soaked public squares, the world's most powerful dictators met endings so brutal and so ironic that entire governments spent decades covering up what really happened. One of them was dragged from a hole in the ground and hanged on live television while the entire planet watched. Another lay paralyzed on his own floor for 12 straight hours because every single guard was too terrified to open his bedroom door. And one was strung up by his feet in a city plaza while an entire nation lined up to beat his lifeless corpse. Join us and let's discover exactly how every great dictator in history met their gruesome end. Let's go.
Number 14. Adolf Hitler. On April 30th, 1945, the most feared man alive sat trapped in a concrete tomb 50 feet beneath the burning streets of Berlin. Adolf Hitler, the architect of the darkest chapter in modern history, directly responsible for the tragedies of millions across Europe, knew the end had finally arrived. The Soviet Red Army was closing in fast, less than a quarter mile from his underground position. You could hear their artillery shaking the bunker ceiling like an earthquake that never stopped. Hitler had married Eva Braun just the day before in a grim underground ceremony. Now, barely 36 hours into their marriage, both were about to meet their fate. He chose to take his own life, ensuring he wouldn't be captured, and Eva did the same. Their remains were carried upstairs and lost to the flames in the Reich Chancellery Garden. But then the story twisted. The Soviets were first to reach the bunker, and Joseph Stalin, himself a ruthless leader who will appear later on this list, personally ordered every detail kept secret. He wanted the entire Western world to live in permanent anxiety that Hitler might still be hiding somewhere. For years, Moscow refused to confirm the facts publicly. That single decision gave birth to dozens of conspiracy theories that persist to this very day. Dental records and eyewitness testimony from bunker survivors all confirmed the same truth. Hitler passed away hiding underground while his so-called thousand-year empire collapsed above him. And the very dictator who concealed his demise would soon meet a chilling end of his own.
Number 13. Benito Mussolini. This is the event that terrified Hitler so badly it convinced him to never allow himself to be captured. Benito Mussolini, the founder of the National Fascist Party, ruled Italy with an iron fist from 1922. He was deeply connected to the Axis forces, but by April of 1945, Mussolini could see his power was gone. Unlike Hitler, he tried to run. He grabbed a German military uniform, disguised himself among retreating soldiers, and attempted to sneak across the border into Switzerland. His plan failed spectacularly. On April 27th, Italian partisans recognized him and captured both Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci. The very next morning, both faced their final sentence in a small village near Lake Como. But the real shock came after. Their bodies were hauled to Milan and left at a gas station in the Piazza Loreto Square. There, they were suspended upside down from a metal girder while enormous crowds of Italian civilians gathered. People screamed insults at the man who had crushed them for over 2 decades. Photographs of his humiliated frame became among the most striking images of the entire era. When those photographs reached Hitler's bunker, he reportedly told his inner circle he would never allow the same humiliation to happen to him. Mussolini dreamed of becoming a new Roman emperor. Instead, he ended up dangling from a gas station roof while a city celebrated his downfall.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this. Number 12. Pol Pot. Between 1975 and 79, roughly 25% of an entire nation was erased. The man behind this tragedy was Pol Pot, leader of the Khmer Rouge, and his departure remains one of the most frustratingly anticlimactic endings in history. Pol Pot rose through the ranks and seized total control in 75. What followed was one of the most extreme social experiments ever forced upon a population. He emptied entire cities, marching millions of urban residents into the countryside for forced labor. He abolished private property, closed schools, and eliminated anyone deemed an intellectual. The tragic fields became the final resting place for millions of men, women, and children. After Vietnamese forces arrived in '79, Pol Pot retreated into the jungle and hid there for nearly 2 decades. In an interview in 1997, he declared with a straight face that his conscience was completely clean. His end came on April 15, 1998, at 72, while under house arrest. The official cause was heart failure, but the circumstances are deeply suspicious. He was cremated on a pile of old tires and garbage before any legitimate investigation could take place. The rush to burn the evidence fueled theories that he was taken out by former allies who feared he might testify before an international tribunal. The truth vanished on that pyre.
Number 11. Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung holds a title no other human being has ever received. He is the eternal president of North Korea. Not a former president, the eternal president. He took power in 1948 and immediately began transforming the northern half of the peninsula into an incredibly isolated and tightly controlled society. He built a cult of personality so extreme it makes every other ruler look humble. Colossal statues towered over every city. Citizens were taught from birth that he possessed supernatural powers. Behind the mythology, his regime crushed all dissent. Political prison camps held hundreds of thousands of inmates, and entire families could be punished for the alleged disloyalty of one person. Kim passed away on July 8, 1994, from a heart issue, but in North Korea, his presence never left. The nation entered a mandatory 3-year mourning period. His body was preserved and placed in a glass sarcophagus, where citizens are still required to bow before him. Power passed to his son, then to his grandson, who rules today. 3 generations controlling an entire nation like a private inheritance.
Number 10. Hideki Tojo. While European leaders dominated Western history books, Imperial Japan produced its own architect of devastation. Hideki Tojo served as Prime Minister of Japan and was the driving force behind the rampage across Asia and the Pacific, beginning with the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor that dragged the United States into the conflict. Under his command, the military committed acts that remain seared into the collective memory of a continent, including the tragedy in Nanking and the Bataan March, where tens of thousands perished. Millions of civilian losses are attributed to operations during his leadership. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, Tojo knew exactly what was coming. On September 11th, American soldiers arrived at his home to arrest him. As they approached, Tojo attempted to take his own life, but he failed. American military doctors immediately rushed to save him, performing emergency surgery. The irony was staggering. They needed him alive so he could face a tribunal. He was nursed back to health, brought before the International Military Tribunal in Tokyo, and found guilty of crimes against humanity. On December 23, 1948, he faced his final sentence at Sugamo Prison. His reported final words expressed no remorse, only regret that his side had lost.
Number 9. Francisco Franco. Francisco Franco did not go quietly. His departure was one of the most drawn-out medical struggles any world leader has ever endured. Franco rose to power after winning the Spanish Civil War and declared himself head of state. His regime blended military authority and conservatism into a suffocating system of control. Political opponents were silenced or exiled by the tens of thousands. He ruled with total authority for nearly 4 decades. But his final chapter was a medical ordeal. Beginning in October 1975, his body started shutting down. He suffered back-to-back heart issues, internal complications, and advanced Parkinson's disease. His medical team performed multiple procedures, connecting him to machines and keeping him technically alive long after his body had surrendered. This dragged on for over 40 excruciating days, driven by political loyalists who needed more time to arrange the transition of power. He finally passed away on November 20th, 1975. He was entombed at the Valley of the Fallen, a massive mausoleum built using forced labor, sparking controversy until his remains were finally relocated in 2019.
Number 8. Idi Amin Dada. Idi Amin was responsible for the loss of hundreds of thousands of his own people, yet he passed away peacefully in a hospital bed in a wealthy nation. He joined the British colonial army in 1946 as a kitchen assistant. That man who started washing dishes would become one of the most intimidating rulers in African history. He climbed through military ranks on sheer physical intimidation. In 1971, he seized total power. His rule was defined by paranoia. He targeted specific groups, expelled tens of thousands of Asians from Uganda, and was surrounded by dark, unproven rumors regarding his personal habits. The mass expulsion collapsed the national economy overnight. In 1979, a combined force toppled his regime. Amin escaped, eventually finding asylum in Saudi Arabia. The royal family granted him a comfortable villa and a generous allowance. He lived there quietly for over 2 decades. No international court pursued him. He passed away in 2003 at 78 from organ failure. One of history's most ruthless figures spent his final years in comfort, never answering for his actions.
Number 7. Fidel Castro. Intelligence agencies tried to eliminate Fidel Castro more than 600 times. Poisoned cigars, tampered seashells, every single attempt failed. Castro seized power in Cuba in 1959, toppling the previous government through armed revolution. Under his rule, Cuba became a one-party state. He controlled the press, eliminated opposition, and aligned the island with the Soviet Union, leading directly to the Cuban Missile Crisis, a moment that brought the entire planet to the edge of catastrophe. Castro championed universal education and free healthcare, but the repression was heavy. Political dissidents packed Cuban jails, and thousands risked everything on makeshift rafts to cross the ocean. He held power for nearly 5 decades before declining health forced him to hand leadership to his brother. Castro passed away in 2016 at 90 years old. The official cause was listed only as natural causes. The man who dodged hundreds of plots departed quietly in his own bed.
Ferdinand Marcos. Ferdinand Marcos achieved something rare. He came to power through a legitimate democratic election in 1965. But once inside the presidential palace, he began systematically dismantling every democratic institution. In 1972, he declared martial law, suspended civil rights, and arrested political opponents. For 14 years, Marcos and his wife Imelda lived in staggering luxury, while ordinary citizens suffered under poverty. Imelda became globally notorious for her collection of designer shoes bought with public money. The breaking point came in 1983 when an opposition leader was eliminated in a fatal incident at the airport. The event ignited a firestorm and millions took to the streets. Marcos was forced to flee to Hawaii, carrying crates of gold and cash worth billions. He spent 3 years in exile before passing away in 1989 from cardiac arrest. A ruler who took billions from his own people was controversially laid to rest among national heroes decades later.
Number 5. Ruhollah Khomeini. Ayatollah Khomeini was not a military commander. He was a cleric who built one of the most powerful regimes of the 20th century on the foundation of divine authority. After years of exile, Khomeini returned to Iran in 1979 and led the revolution that toppled the monarchy. He transformed the nation into a republic where religious figures held supreme control. As supreme leader, Khomeini wielded absolute power. Dissent was met with harsh sentences. In 1988, he authorized mass sentencings of political prisoners, resulting in thousands of losses. He also issued an infamous decree against a British author, forcing him into hiding for over a decade. Khomeini passed away in 1989 following complications from surgery. His funeral became one of the largest human gatherings in recorded history. Millions flooded the streets, and the crowd became so chaotic that mourners nearly dismantled his casket. Soldiers had to intervene and use helicopters to secure the area. Even in departure, the chaos he inspired could not be controlled.
Number 4. Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi ruled Libya for over 42 years, seizing power in 1969. He built a bizarre cult of personality around himself, dressing in flamboyant outfits and publishing a rambling political manifesto. Behind the spectacle hid a severe ruler responsible for countless losses and the financing of international incidents. His downfall came during the events of 2011. Rebel forces, backed by international intervention, rose against his regime. On October 20th, forces tracked Gaddafi to his hometown. They found him hiding inside a concrete drainage pipe on the side of a road. What happened next was captured on shaky cameras. Gaddafi was taken by the mob and faced the absolute fury of the crowd in the streets. He did not survive the encounter. There was no trial, just raw street justice captured in pixelated footage. His remains were placed inside a commercial freezer in the city and put on public display for days.
Number 3. Mao Zedong. Few rulers in history are linked to as much devastation as Mao Zedong. The numbers are almost impossible to process. Estimates range from 40 to 80 million people lost as a direct or indirect result of his policies.
He rose to power in 1949 and launched catastrophic campaigns designed to rapidly transform China. The Great Leap Forward forced millions off their farms, resulting in a historic famine. Entire regions starved, while local officials were too terrified to report the real numbers. Then came the Cultural Revolution, where anyone deemed politically suspicious was publicly humiliated or worse by roaming groups. Through all of it, Mao maintained a massive cult of personality. Criticizing him was a fatal mistake. Mao passed away in 1976 at 82 after his health crumbled from multiple severe issues. When he finally passed, the entire nation entered mandatory mourning, and his preserved body remains in a crystal display where millions still visit it today.
Number 2. Saddam Hussein. Few downfalls have been as public and globally witnessed as that of Saddam Hussein. For over 20 years, Saddam ruled Iraq through a combination of secret forces and sheer intimidation that left countless tragic marks on the region. His most infamous campaigns involved the use of banned weapons against civilian villages. His end began in 2003 when international forces entered Iraq. After months of evading capture, soldiers found him in the most humiliating location imaginable, a tiny underground hole near a farmhouse. The man who had built dozens of lavish palaces was pulled from a dirt pit looking entirely broken. After a long tribunal, he was found guilty of crimes against humanity. His final sentence was carried out in December 2006. Unofficial footage leaked almost immediately, showing the chaotic final moments before his departure. The video exploded across the internet and was broadcast worldwide. The global public simply watched the definitive end of his era.
Number 1. Joseph Stalin. Here is the man who deliberately hid Hitler's demise from the entire world. Joseph Stalin ruled his nation with absolute, paralyzing authority. After eliminating his rivals, including one hunted down internationally and removing anyone who even slightly disagreed with him, Stalin built a system responsible for tens of millions of losses. His primary tool was a network of harsh labor camps scattered across frozen landscapes. But the way Stalin himself departed is one of history's most fascinating chapters. On the night of March 1st, 1953, Stalin had a gathering at his residence. By morning, he had not come out of his room. His guards noticed, but no one dared open his door. Every official was so paralyzed by fear of the ruler that they just stood there and waited. 12 full hours crawled by before anyone worked up the courage to enter. They found Stalin incapacitated on the floor, having suffered a severe medical emergency. Doctors were eventually summoned, but the damage was catastrophic. He passed away days later. Many historians believe he was deliberately neglected by members of his own inner circle, men who were terrified they would be the next names on his list. The man who made millions live in fear met his end because his own guards were too scared to check on him.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.